Where there is power, there is always resistance. Otherwise, there would be no power. If neoliberalism, and in particular human capital, is the new kind of power, since they produce subjects, then what is the resistance? We might approach this question through a group of Italian political theorists called the Autonomists, which grew out of the political struggles of the 1970s and 80s. Like Foucault, they too believed that capitalism had undergone a radical transformation in this period, and which also explained the complete failure of the left. Lazzarato, in his essay Immaterial Labour, explains that the nature of work has undergone a profound transformation in both form and content. In form, work has increasingly become a matter of information and cybernetics, and in content, what he describes as mass intellectuality. The defeat of the unions in the 70s was not just the result of policy, but because of this change in the nature of work in capitalism. The most important work for capitalism, the one that produces the most profit, is intellectual and not manual labor. Manual labor is outsourced. This means at the very heart of capitalism, the subjectivity of the worker becomes a necessary part of the production process. My intelligence, but also my linguistic and empathetic abilities. It is impossible then to separate life from work, since my life, with all its aspects, has become my work. That is what I sell. The contradiction of capital is not between the worker and capital from the outside, but inside the soul of the worker herself. Capital directly exploits our subjectivity, but to do so, it must control and limit it. It is not enough to go to work and to do your job adequately. You have to be your job, and anything less than total enthusiasm is frowned upon. From the outside, compared to the previous form of work, this new kind of work might appear to be a liberation, especially since its watchword is express yourself. Yet in reality, it might be a more insidious and arduous form of control, the more so because the worker has internalized it. Lazzarato goes on to explain that labor has also become more immaterial in its production and its orientation towards consumption. In terms of production, work is increasingly more about information and communication. It is not surprising that the richest and wealthiest corporations of the 21st century are Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, where profits are related to information and not manufacturing. In this new kind of production, what matters above all is consumption. Although Apple might make smartphones, that isn't where its massive profits come from, but in presenting a lifestyle, a brand. Be an Apple customer. The profits of late capitalism are therefore to be found in marketing and advertising, which of course are what Facebook and Google really are, rather than free services. Amazon then becomes the vehicle of this consumption. When the brand means the selling of a lifestyle, capital and life become one. But this unity is at a price, because capital can only co-opt the creativity of life by constraining and limiting it to its own end, which is ultimately profit. The price, argues Paulo Virno in his book The Grammar of the Multitude, is the nihilism of work, expressed in the three fundamental moods of late capitalism of cynicism, opportunism, and anxiety. Cynicism, because I know that the norms of work are basically meaningless. Opportunism, because I will pretend to believe in them in order to be promoted. And finally, anxiety, because I am in competition with everyone else who is equally cynical and opportunistic. It is not just that work is increasingly precarious, but also my subjectivity is more and more fragile. As Virno remarks, Marx, in the Fragment on Machines in the Grundrisse, a text beloved of the Autonomists, believed that the increasing socialization of work through technology would lead to the imminent transformation of capitalism to communism. Why Marx was wrong is that he did not see that capitalism would completely capture this socialization, that capitalism itself would become subjective. This is why the traditional left lacks an adequate response. In his essay on this new form of social control, Postscript on the Society of Control, Deleuze concludes that the young will have to invent a new kind of resistance. The German philosopher Byung-Chul Han, in his book Biopolitics, gives us an indication of what this new kind of resistance might be. He tells us that the new freedom is in fact subjugation, but the harder to recognize because it presents itself as a liberation. There is no possibility of any kind of political solution to this impasse because there is no solidarity, no collective we that we might appeal to. Politics itself is part of our consumer society. We complain about politics like we complain about a faulty product or a failed Amazon delivery. Social media itself has become a great diversion from any kind of political activity or organization. The new kind of power doesn't enclose and inhibit us, but the opposite. It activates, motivates, and incentivizes us. Share everything, log and tweet as much as you like. Express yourself as long as you sell yourself. You are your brand. We do not need to be liberated to work, but from work, and not for a leisure time that is just an interval between activities. What we need to develop is useless time, what Han describes as a new kind of asceticism. To be an ascetic in late capitalism that produces subjects that sell themselves and see themselves as capital is to become an idiot. Han explains that to be an idiot is to be like Socrates or Descartes, who knew that they didn't know anything, philosophical idiots. Yet further even than these examples of idiots, we have to become absurd, idiosyncratic, unique and awkward. The first resistance to this new form of subjection is to reclaim ourselves. But for that, we need a new language of the self and a new way of being a self.